Okay, so this video is a bit of a follow-up to my previous two videos on gyroscopic navigation and all of that. I had a couple of points I wanted to add. The first one based on a comment that I just got, which just really blew me away. It's so simple, and yet it's... However, it seems you could also prove this by never leaving home, unless there's something I'm not understanding. If you were to just set the gyro in a gimbal base, where it could move freely, and then put it in motion with its axis in a vertical position, in the next 6 hours, wouldn't you see the axis slowly move to a horizontal position at the base as the base rotates with the globe Earth? If it doesn't, then the Earth is not a spinning ball. Okay, so after taking a few seconds to let what he's saying absorb, I was like, holy cow, I think he's right. And that's pretty insane, because they don't ever talk about that, and you would think they would. I mean, right there in the film, he's saying that the gyroscope resists the pull of Earth. It does not stay in alignment with gravity or with the surface of the Earth, right? So that's when it goes into all the explanation of how the magnetic compass supposedly is what corrects it, and that's a whole nother thing, but I'll get into that in a minute. But it's totally true that if the gyroscope on the gimbal, when it's spun up fast enough, is going to resist the gravity of the Earth, when any kind of vehicle is moving around the ball, well, then the same thing is going to apply just being in place on the surface of the Earth, and then the surface moves. And like you said, 6 hours, that's a quarter of the rotation day. That would give you a 90-degree difference. It should be pretty simple thing to prove. Now, of course, none of the you don't hear any of the Navy guys talking about this. And the crazy part is that, in a nutshell, what I think it means is that really the only way a gyroscopic navigation system could work is on a flat Earth. I mean, period. Because when you think about what they are saying, what are explaining about how the thing works, and that it does not stay aligned with the surface of the Earth, right? It always has to be. They're talking about how it needs to be adjusted when a gyroscope is in a vehicle that moves around the Earth. But at the same time, the Earth is constantly moving, so that's going to be throwing you out of alignment from the true up and down as well. So how is a magnetic compass going to know how to, or anything else for that matter, to know how to adjust the gyroscope in relation to the Earth, accounting for both the motion, the movement of the vehicle, whether it's a plane or a sub or a ship or whatever, and the motion of the surface of the Earth around the center of the Earth, right? Which is supposedly where gravity is pulling everything down towards, right? So you've got two constantly changing factors, all the time, or at least one, because even if a gyroscope is sitting still, it's still moving on the surface of the Earth. But there's nothing to really. I mean, so the navigation system needs a navigation system. I mean, it's completely, it's absurd. And then when you take it a step further, I mean, obviously, according to the Copernican model, the Earth is not the only thing that's moving. So if rigidity in space, this principle of rigidity in space, tells us that, the gyroscope will resist. I mean, that clip says it will resist all forces put upon it, right? So gravity. And this bears out too, because we know that when they use gyroscopes in jet planes, right, so they always know which way is up is down, and they're doing all these dogfighting maneuvers and barrel rolls, and subjecting the pilot and the plane to, lots of G-forces. So if you're doing dogfighting maneuvers in a fighter jet, let's say, and you've got your gyroscope on its gimbals in there, so the pilot always knows which way is up and down and doesn't have to, look out his window. That means the gyroscope is resisting several G's of force. So if a gyroscope can function in that kind of an application, right, going hundreds of miles an hour, moving at crazy speeds and having to constantly stay level and resist that many G-forces on it, then what if you can resist that strong of gravitational forces, then it's resisting all of them, right? So not just the Earth's gravitation, but any of the other, gravities that are lesser than the Earth's that are supposedly functioning throughout the solar system. So I mean, my point is that there's lots of motions that are supposedly happening in a Copernican model, not just the Earth's rotation, but the Earth orbiting around the sun, the solar system rotating around the galaxy rotating around, the universe, and so on. So hypothetically, you would think that a truly precision functioning, military industrial grade gyroscope would be holding its fixed position, its rigidity in space, against all of those motions. So if you fired up a gyroscope, shouldn't you just see it doing all kinds of crazy things? I mean, shouldn't it just be not just moving 90 degrees over 6 hours, but it could be doing all kinds of motions because of all the different orbital things that are supposedly happening? But no, it stays in place, right? We're talking here, of course, we're talking about the kinds of gyroscopic navigation systems that they use, submarines and ships and things. We're not talking about toy gyroscopes, just for the record. But the other thing I was thinking too was just back on that video with the gyroscope and supposedly being corrected by the magnetic compass in that 1960 Navy training video. The more I've thought about that, the more absurd that is for a number of reasons. First of all, because a gyroscope is designed to maintain orientation in terms of several axes, and yet simply relying on a magnetic compass to tell you where north is, well, that's going to tell you, that's only at the most going to give you orientation for one axis, right? And depending on where you are on the globe, north is always going to be in one direction, but it won't tell you like where the plane should be depending on where you are on the globe, because obviously if you're up in Alaska, it's going to be different than if you were down in South America or something. A magnetic compass doesn't point you directly at where the magnetic north is or the North Pole is. It only gives you it's basically a two-dimensional device, which is kind of worthless for supposedly calibrating a gyroscope. Not to mention, in this other video, it actually explains how you have several issues with magnetic compasses themselves in terms of magnetic variation and deviation, I believe. And anybody who's ever used a map and compass, like when they're out hiking, understands that magnetic north is not just this clean, easy thing that is the same wherever you are. Depending on where you are in the country or the world, magnetic north is always warped, so you always have to adjust for that in your calculations when using a compass, right? You always have to delineate depending on where you are, like for the magnetic north. Now, how is a magnetic compass that is supposedly in a plane hooked up to a gyroscope going to know exactly where it is in the world to account for the amount of magnetic declination? That's the word, declination. To account for the correct amount of declination, to know where true north is, to then be able to reorient the gyroscope, all in split-second timing. It just gets ridiculous. So I think the bottom line is that, gyroscopes, the only way that they could be of any use is on a completely flat plane, where up is always up, and sideways is always sideways, and down is always down, and otherwise it contradicts itself. The explanations they give for gyroscopes and how they function contradicts their own model. So there you go.